All right, Doug. Today we want to focus only on one core question, and that is, when do you know that it's time to fight, and when is it time to walk away? Or as Kenny Rogers says, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
Yeah, that's always a question, and I guess it has two aspects. One is the practical, tactical aspect. Are you going to win or are you going to lose? Because if you can avoid uh, conflict, it's usually better to do that. Simply because if it's a physical conflict, I mean, you could get severely damaged, or you could severely damage the other person, which will have all kinds of consequences, legal and who knows what else. So, you know, knowing when to hold them and when to fold them is important from a strictly physical point of view. But also, there's a moral aspect of this too, because if you refuse to fold them, then it becomes, well, maybe you're not going to fold them because it's a matter of right and wrong, and you value the moral aspect of it more than any possible physical downside. But if you hold on to anything too long, it becomes like a burning coal in the middle of your psyche that can ruin your life. So yeah, it's really important to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And of course, Kenny Rogers' song is about gambling, playing poker in particular. And there it's a question of, are you going to try to bluff the other guy out and make him fold them first? I mean, it's really it's a simple song, but it really touches on a lot of basic things in life itself. I mean, you can look at almost everything in when to hold them and when to fold them. It can be physical conflict, or it could be a love affair for that matter.
Yep.
I mean, are you going to keep pursuing that other person or fold them? My own view on that is that it's a question of reach and withdraw. And if you're always reaching to another person and you're not getting a response, that's a big strategic error. It's really better to withdraw and see if they want to reach back to you at that point. So when do you hold them? When do you fold them? Sometimes you got to reach like you're going to hold it, and then fold them, but you can always reach back again. So it's it's a good way of analyzing, determining what you should do in lots of circumstances if you look at the different aspects of it.
So let's think about it from the election standpoint. I mean, one is right now there's the mainstream media has named Biden as the projected winner of the election. Trump has not conceded that he's lost, and there's lots of reasonable allegations for fraud or things that should be looked at least by the courts and would, through normal process, get looked at through the courts. I mean, how do you think that Trump should even look at this, knowing when to, whether to pursue it or not?
God, it's a real situation where approximately half the people in the country apparently really hate you, which I find strange, because I mean, sure, he's got some peculiarities, but why do people hate him as much as they do? I mean, this has never been clear to me. I've met lots of people, and they all say, "Oh, he's disgusting. He's awful. He's coarse. He's blah blah blah. All these things." Yeah, but why do you hate him? Because if you just look through recent history, Lyndon Baines Johnson was by far the most coarse, vulgar, dishonest, devoid of virtues president maybe in US history. But at least until the Vietnam War started up, nobody hated Johnson. So why do they hate Trump this way? It's really a mystery to me. I guess I've never interrogated a Trump hater because, frankly, I don't associate with many. And
Well,
uh,
hate's not really rational anyway. So when I have interrogated Trump haters and asked them, as benignly as I could so that they wouldn't get defensive, what you find is that it's there's an they have their rational reasons, they have their justifications that they use for it, but they're all like straw men. There's nothing really there. There's nothing under them. They'll say he's a racist, he's a misogynist. I mean, just those ad hominem claims essentially at him. And then you ask them for an example and they don't have any examples of it, or those examples are provably false. So it's really tough. I mean, and then you realize it's just something emotional. It's an emotional hatred comes emotionally. It's the reason isn't even included at all.
yeah, that's right. It always seems like they're just repeating talking points that they've never explored at all.
Yep.
So it's very, very strange. And I mean, I don't have any particular negative animus towards Biden more than almost any other member of the deep state anymore.
Right.
Swamp that's been there. He's just another goofball that's wheedled his way to the top. But why would they hate Trump? I mean, the average guy. I know why the deep state guys hate him, but anyway, know when to hold him, when to fold him. What's Trump going to do? I don't have a good enough grip on Trump's personality to be able to figure what he was going to do. If we were playing poker, hopefully you would have been watching
Yeah.
uh, the other guy's style of play for long enough that you could have some anticipation of whether he's going to hold them or fold them,
Yep.
and whether therefore it's a strong hand or a weak hand in his opinion. But I just don't know enough about Trump. He seems like a very stubborn guy that is
Mm-hmm.
not going to want to admit defeat. So if I was going to bet money, I would say Trump is going to do everything that he can to try to stay in office and win. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess that's, I mean, I guess it probably depends upon how the cards are dealt this week in particular, because I think there's a number of court cases being filed, and if some of those are looking back that they're showing some promise, moving positively through the courts, then I suppose you might stick with the hand longer and not walk away. But I mean, just the fight required to be able to, the stamina required, I think, to be able to fight this, I think is so massive. And he has remarkable stamina, no doubt about it. But
Oh, incredible.
when people are after you like this, it just seems like is it worth it? I mean, this whole thing, this whole presidential episode of his life probably seems like it was not, I don't know how he could think it was worth it for him personally, because all he's done is take a lot of people who loved him, now hate him. That's basically what it's done to him.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm trying to think. So Trump has, we can't look at his background in investing and business. And he's had some business disasters. I mean, everybody who's an entrepreneur does. That goes with the territory. And he does seem to cut his losses, which to say fold them after a certain point. I mean,
Yep.
he killed his Trump Airlines from DC to New York to Boston after 18 months. It didn't work out. Well, airlines are a crappy business anyway. I don't know why he got into that. And what else? The casinos. I guess he pulled the plug on them. And there must have been a whole bunch of things. So he's not
Yeah,
afraid to fold them either.
he's not. He's not. And I think it would make you think that's why I think that the way the hand is dealt, to use this metaphor, probably unnecessarily, this week really makes a big difference. Like how these legal cases go, and if there's, if the momentum is just building, and he doesn't look like there's any strong single case that will really drive through the court system positively on his part, he'll probably look to exit in the best way possible, like you did with his bad businesses. There'd be a bankruptcy of some case, so he comes out in as good of a position as possible despite the failure.
Yeah, it may be a failure, but he can deny it as long as it's still plausible deniability as opposed to an abject smoking hole in the ground.
Right. Exactly. Well, what about for all the supporters of Trump, though? The people who are basically, I mean, there are a lot of people that are very upset today and really have been for the last several days because of this election stuff. But I think that, those people, they're not giving up the ghost for the most part. A lot of them are not. They want to keep fighting. They want to go to these rallies and protests. And I saw some million MAGA march that they're planning for next Saturday in Washington. Um, I mean, how should you look at this as just a normal citizen, do you think?
Hmm. Well, as an anarcho-capitalist, I'm not actively politically involved. I mean, I guess the reason we're doing these podcasts is a good karma kind of thing, but not because we expect it's going to change the world or even change many people's individual minds. So I'm not really sure, but a lot of people out there seem to have made Trump kind of the focus of their lives. They take all this stuff a lot more seriously than certainly I do. Maybe that's a result of, my having an interest in paleontology to start with, and which is a division of geology. And when you look at things from the viewpoint of billions or hundreds of millions or tens of millions of years, what's really very significant? Well, not very much. Or even if you look at it from the point of view of history, of which we have about 5,000 years, surprisingly little. So this too will pass. But yeah, I can understand how they take it seriously, because even I feel that if the Democrats really are elected and Biden actually wins, I guess we talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. I I think, not just feel, that they're going to use everything they can to cement themselves in office with making Puerto Rico and DC states so they capture the Senate, and packing the Supreme Court so the laws won't be overturned, and using all these hardcore leftists like AOC, and there are many, many more of them, to do all kinds of things and change the agencies. So how are you going to get rid of these people? It's really like after the Bolsheviks took over in Russia in 1917, how do you get rid of them? It's really hard. So if you have seriously collectivistic statist Democrats that take over the American state, it's going to be about as hard to get rid of them as the Bolsheviks in 1917. And they're actually pretty much the same personality types. I mean, these personality types exist across space and time, in all ages, in all countries. And it looks like they're getting their day in the sun here in the US. So actually, I hope for that reason that Trump doesn't fold them. But I don't know what's going on in his mind.
Yeah, no, and it's impossible to know. And he's got to do his own calculus for like what's in his best interest. And I think it comes down for everybody. We can look at these things like the political system, and yeah, we of course don't want it taken over by Bolsheviks and all, and we don't want that to lead to a Stalin. We don't want all of the disaster that can come from that, and really the elimination of personal freedoms. I mean, they've been reduced substantially already, but almost totally eliminated, you would think, in that kind of over time, if that happens. But some of it's within our control and some of it's not within our control. And I think I think that's where the heart of knowing when to fold them is that you mentioned in the very beginning, like, can you even win? Because if you can't win, then you don't exhaust yourself on the field trying to win a certain battle.
Sometimes winning isn't important. Look at some great battles. Like an interesting small battle was the Alamo. And it seems pretty clear that the guys at the Alamo could have gotten away escaped, made it through the Mexican lines, and lived happily ever after. But they decided not to. So they decided, even though they knew it was disastrous to hold them, they did, and desired not to hold them. So maybe Trump is thinking that way.
Hmm.
I mean, it's so hard to say, but he doesn't have a lot of support, I think, around him. I mean, who does he have around him that has actual core philosophical beliefs that would say, I draw the line here and
Yeah.
no further? I don't know of anybody. I mean, these people are, they're cardboard cutouts, the people around him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Seem very
maybe Steve Bannon
utilitarian.
has some backbone, but I don't know. Do you think so?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know. I'd say they all seem very utilitarian. It seemed, ultimately, and that does not work well over time.
No, not in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., it's all about getting power because you like power, and the power leads you to your big payoff after you're out of office, after you position your friends so they can help you when you can take the money without being prosecuted and so forth. Well, like the Clintons, of course. I
Exactly.
mean, worth hundreds of millions of dollars now, which is a far cry from Bill saying, I can't even pay my legal bills. So everybody knows they get a payoff when they're out of office.
Yep.
So
Comes later. What do you think? So let's apply this not to politics then. What do you think? Is this the same idea applies to investing, whether you're in your own, whether it's your own business as an entrepreneur, knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them, or even a trade?
yeah, it's really, really important. One of the oldest aphorisms in the investing business is cut your losses and let your winners run. And if I had observed that more consistently, if I'd paid attention to that more consistently throughout my life, I'd be way ahead of the game today. Don't hold on to something just because it's cheap and double down and buy more, unless you know the company like the back of your hand, and therefore you can be very, very certain. Nope. If it looks like you got a loser and you can see the reasons why it's a loser, cut your losses and redeploy the capital someplace else as opposed to ride down a sinking ship. So I think that's a really important and underobserved aphorism about investing.
Yeah, there's something about human psychology though that makes us, when you actually have to sell that stock that's down 80%, like registering that loss is so psychologically difficult for people to do. They kind of ignore it. And like you said, on the other side of it, they actually sell their winners early when things are riding. They've had a big run up. They want to capture that gain and secure
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Exactly. Your psychology, absolutely. I mean, you can intellectually recognize the intelligence of letting your winners run and cutting your losses, but psychologically, you're totally correct. Both on the buy and the sell side, you don't want to do it. So yeah, you're quite correct.
How
Yeah.
does this how does this apply to you mentioned earlier with just we're talking about like personal relationships, with love affairs. You talked about that, but how does this relate to just other relationships in life? Because relationships are prone to conflict of all kinds, whether they be business relationships and friendships and all of that. And like some of them are worth certainly working through, and others are worth, just when there's a conflict, just seeking to extract yourself from it. I mean, how do you apply this concept, I guess, to the relationships in your life?
Well, I think character is by far the most important thing. And the question is figuring out whether people that you're dealing with or are thinking of dealing with, are they stand-up guys or are they sociopaths? And sometimes sociopaths, criminal personalities, I mean, they can be fun. They can be smart. They can be entertaining. They can give you short-term rewards. But, there's 7 billion human beings on the planet. So you got a wide choice of people to hang out with and just stay away from bad people. It's like, look, it's that old saying about the frog and the scorpion. I guess everybody's probably heard it, but maybe everybody hasn't heard it. It's there was a flood, and a frog and a scorpion were stuck on an island in the middle of the river, and it was going to be inundated shortly. So the scorpion goes up to the frog and says, "Look, I'm going to drown. Can I ride on your back across the river? Because you can swim." And the frog says, "Well, look, you're dangerous. You're a scorpion. I don't want you on my back." And the scorpion says, "Look, be reasonable. Why would I kill you? Then we'd both drown." Frog thinks about it. "Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, hop on." Halfway through across the river, scorpion sings him. Frog asks, "Oh, why'd you kill me? Now we're both going to die." And the scorpion says, "Because I'm a scorpion." And so I think that's, you know, I think that answers the question. It's just stay away from those people and try to get better at diagnosing who they are. I found that they almost always give you little tip-offs,
Mhm.
even if even if they are really good at disguising themselves. Occasionally, they'll drop the mask of sanity
Mhm.
and they'll do something or say something, and you figure out, this is what's going on. It's like when you're asking somebody a question, and it's an important question. Here's what I've found. It's you ask them a question, you get an answer. Okay, that's the that's the what am I? That's the mask of sanity answer. But then you ask them a question. Yeah, but in addition to that, what do you think? And many times that will penetrate and you'll get the real answer by asking it that way.
Mm.
Yeah, but in addition to that,
Mm.
and you can find out, it helps you to know who you're dealing with. And at that point, it'll really help you to know whether to hold them or fold them, including that relationship, that friendship.
And so when you see that, if you see these data points that are kind of look like problems, you're not one to go into conflict though. Like, how do you normally resolve these things with people?
Well, I'm conflict averse for the reasons that we pointed out earlier, because as I think you mentioned, conflict tends to get people's back up and they want to defend their position. They want to prove
Yeah.
that they're right. So conflict from that point of view doesn't really help at all. In addition to the fact you can get hurt and so forth. So I just like to ask questions. The Socratic method, okay, I think was a really important contribution that Plato or Socrates, because they're really the same person, the way the various dialogues in the Republic and that were written, is that it was all about asking questions. People would ask Socrates questions, and he would ask questions back, and that dialogue you'd arrive at, and questions aren't really threatening, as opposed to statements. I believe this, and I'm certain of that, and it's better just to ask a question and find out what the other person's thinking. And maybe if the person figures, hey, I can't answer this question, I don't have a position to defend, maybe you both go looking for the truth. And maybe it'll work, and it'll definitely work out better than getting into a conflict. So I guess that's my approach. I really believe in the Socratic method and asking questions and not trying to prove anything, even if I have a strong view about something. I mean, hell, for all I know, I might learn something. Uh,
On
hopefully,
the,
hopefully nothing too big. But
at this point, the likelihood of getting someone else to admit that they were wrong about something is so low that, that's kind of almost, we hope when we come into these personal conflicts with people, we expect that by showing a preponderance to the evidence and by having a better argument, I'm somehow going to get you to go, oh, you got me. I screwed that up, and that just so rarely happens. So rarely happens. The only time I think
Yeah,
it's worth.
exactly. And I think even in determining whether you want to hold them or fold them, maybe the best way to come to that determination, and sometimes it's got to be really quick. I mean, spur of the moment, so you don't have time to question everything. But if you got a little bit of time to figure out whether you want to hold them or fold them, maybe the best method is just to ask yourself questions and try to answer the questions. Uh, that can be better than staking out your position and moving ahead to one alternative or the other.
Hmm. Makes sense to me. At least then you can, at least if nothing else, it should cause you to think about the actual circumstances and consequences more objectively. Just asking yourself.
It's all about making choices. So we're talking about what to do in the case of fighting and loving and investing and business and gambling. I mean, we've only got so much time and you don't want to waste too much of it. So therefore, you want to cut your losses and let your winners run as opposed to going down with the ship. It's a very important question. I mean, Kenny Rogers, who invented that phrase, no one to hold him or no one to fold? I don't know if Kenny did or not.
I don't. I thought he was the songwriter on. I know it's his. He performed it. I assumed he was the songwriter too, but could be wrong.
Could be something that's been around so long it's lost in the mists of history.
No, actually, Google's amazing for this. According to Google, the songwriter is a guy named Don Schlitz.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Von Schlitz, like the beer that went out of
Yeah.
business.
Exactly.
Schlitz
The
was the
golf.
beer that made Milwaukee famous and then it disappeared. What a shame. Isn't that interesting? Well, smart guy. If he, at least if he investigated under the surface of knowing when to hold them or fold them, as opposed to just coining a cute little catchphrase.
Yeah, it's a great. It's really useful though, and I think so. Ultimately, I think that a lot of people are probably it's certainly relevant to now because for Trump, it's relevant. It's relevant for everybody, whether or not they still keep giving their energy to this political process. And one of the things that may have come out of all this for everybody is realizing like when people say your vote doesn't really count or it doesn't really matter, that there's a point to it. There's a point why people really believe this, and it's not just fraud. It's just that you're in these large organizations. You're trying to get enough votes to sort of coerce the slightly smaller portion of the population to go along with your program, and trying to resolve any major difference through that, trying to get control of the wheels of government. It seems like a crazy idea.
Yeah, well, as we were talking about before, that's why I believe that the best solution to the problems, the rift that we have in the United States is secession, as opposed to one group getting control of the power in Washington and using it to hammer down the other group. You just have to go your separate ways sometimes. And that's what will happen eventually in the US. And I think
One or
it should
another.
happen sooner or later.
Right. The sooner it would be less conflict oriented, I think. But
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Well, I think that's helpful, Doug. Thanks for exploring that idea with me.
Thank you, Matt. It was very helpful to have this dialectic, as Marx would have said, the
Exactly.
thesis and the antithesis. Well, no real antithesis, but we did arrive at something of a synthesis.
I think so.